GitHub is a platform for storing code, and we're going to be starting by creating accounts on github.com. Now, you won't need an account to view code, but you will need an account when you start pushing up your own code later. And so we're going to go ahead and get started with that now to make the process smoother. You'll want to create your account with whatever email address you plan on using associated with the team, but that's all you need to get started here. GitHub Desktop is an application that you can use with GitHub to make using GitHub a little bit easier. If you're not familiar with using Git in the command line, this is a great tool to add, and it's available for both Mac OS and Windows. Desktop.github.com should detect automatically if you're running Windows or Mac OS. If you're running Mac OS, you can even select to use the Apple Silicon M1, M2, and so on specific build. Once you download it, you just double click on it to start the installation process. And one of the first things it'll have you do is sign in to your GitHub account, though you can use it without a GitHub account or logging in. But once you do, it'll pull in your username and email from GitHub. If you go into your user settings in GitHub, you can use a private email address so that doesn't happen. And once everything gets loaded, you can start seeing repositories and accessing your account. One way to check if you already have Java installed is to try to run the Java command or run Java with the -- version flag to see if anything comes up on the command line. As you can see on mine, I don't have Java installed currently, so we're going to resolve that. Endoflife.date is a great website for determining if your software is in or out of date, and the Java page is going to let us find the right version of Java. This page will report the release number, when it was released, if it's in active support, or if it's in security support, as well as when the latest was released. Java has a lot of versions here, going all the way back to 7. You can see that 8 is still a long-term support release, whose security updates don't end for another 7 years as of this writing, even though it was released in 2014. Scrolling up, you can see that there are a few more releases. 11 is another long-term support release, whose active security ends very soon, but whose security fixes will go for a few more years. The current version of Java goes all the way up to 20, but these versions aren't long-term support, and Java 17 is the current long-term support release, which means it'll get updates probably longer than most. So that's the one we're going to stick with for this. To install Java, we're going to go to adoptium.net, and on the homepage you can find the latest long-term support release available for your system, but we're going to look at all the others, and this page is accessible at adoptium.net/tamarin/releases. On this page you can select your operating system to include Windows, Mac OS, a couple of flavors of Linux. You can select your architecture. Most Windows systems will be on the x64 platform, although you may be on if you're on an older computer, it could be x86. There's actually two types of package you can install for Java. One is JDK, or the Java Development Kit. The other is JRE, or the Java Runtime Environment. If you're just running Java applications, you need the JRE, but if you need to write Java applications like we'll be doing, you need the JDK. Now, a JDK also includes a JRE. For the version, you'll want a long-term support release. We want 17, so we'll go with that. And finally, you should only have one option left, and in this case, we're going to be installing on Windows, and so I tend to prefer using the MSI version. It's a little bit easier to go with, and then you're going to wait for the download, and then you'll want to double-click on that and install it just like you would any other application. One of the nice things about using the installer is that it sets up a lot of environment variables for you, like your class path and your path, and adds some jars. So a lot of technical things for Java get handled for you in this. And then you can run that same Java -- version command to see what version of Java you have. And I only have 17, so everything here should reflect that now. If you're running Mac OS, you'll go through a very similar process, selecting your operating system, then your architecture. If you're running an M1 Mac, your architecture is the ARch64. If you're running, and that's going to be for an M1 and M2, any Apple Silicon. If you're running an Intel processor, it'll be the x64 build. And you select the others just like we do for the Windows, and then you install just like you do other software on Mac OS. This will require a password if you're using a newer version of Mac OS, so that you guarantee you have administrative privileges. And just like on Windows, it's going to install the packages you need and set some variables for you so that when you run the same Java version commands, it should automatically set it to 17, but you can also run the user libexec java home -v command to see all of your installed versions if something's wrong. The tool used for software development in Java that we're going to look at is Visual Studio Code, which you can get from code.visualstudio.com/download. The tool is available on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. If you're looking at the Windows install, there are several options. The two primary ones are the user installer and the system installer. I prefer the system installer, so that's what I'm installing, but make sure you select the x64 version, which is the most likely version supported by your more modern computer. But make sure to choose the version that matches your computer's architecture. The download may take a few moments to complete, but once it does, you can find the file in your downloads folder and start the install process. When the installer starts up, you'll see the standard agreement that you'll want to accept. And for most of the screen, you'll just want to accept the default options. The exception is this next screen with multiple checkboxes on it. I prefer to check all these options just because I think they provide for a better user experience the more you use the software. After the install completes, after just a few more seconds, you should be able to launch the software and see the welcome screen, as well as a tab that includes the release notes for the version you've installed, which will always give you some insight as to what are some new things or some changes in the software. To the left of the screen, you'll see a few tabs. The bottom one here is the Extensions tab, and this is where you can find all the extensions you currently have installed or can find new ones to install. We're going to install the Java extension pack, so we're just going to type the word Java to search, and it should be the first result, and it is provided by Microsoft. And you can see here that is the extension pack for Java, and we're just going to click Install. And what that's going to do is it's going to install several extensions at the same time, which includes, among other things, a Java debugger and some language support. When the extensions finish installing, a new tab will open giving you some getting started tips. It even walks you through how to install a JDK if you need to. We've already done that at this point, so we don't need to worry about that, and we can close this tab. If you have a GitHub account, you can sign in on Visual Studio Code so that you can sync your settings from a different computer if you're using Visual Studio Code on multiple machines. I'm going to turn mine on just so you can see what that looks like, but all it requires is signing into your GitHub account. It'll route to your web browser, and when it comes back, it'll start installing and applying your settings. So you can see mine looks pretty different now. Installing on a Mac looks pretty similar. It's just that once you download the application, you just want to drop it into your applications folder before launching it, and then you can go through the same process of finding the Java extension pack, as well as turning on your settings sync and applying your settings from another computer. And you'll see here that mine looks the same as it did on the other computer.